Hello, this is Dr. Lisa Belisle, and you are listening to or watching Radio Maine. And today I have with me in the studio artist Jack Gable. Thanks for coming in today.
Nice to be here.
So, Jack, you've been doing this art gig for quite a while now.
Well, I've been working as an artist since around 1979 or 80. I came here from another profession, but I've enjoyed it, so it's been quite a while, yeah.
What did you do before that?
I was with GM design staff. I designed Trans Am Firebirds, of all things, and loved it. Had a great time there. I was there about 15 years and got into what I would call lower management, did a less art, remembering that design people are generally artists. You have to create shapes and so on. Had so much fun, and then I started painting on the side to bring out the art part again. And I had no complaints whatever, realized that I loved it. GM had treated me really well, and my wife and I decided to move to Maine to paint. And it was one of those 35-year-old decisions that a lot of people make. And we moved to Kennebunkport, and things began from there.
So, was your training in art before you went to work for GM?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. I'd gone to University of Kentucky prior, but I'd always loved to draw cars. I was, a kid, loved cars, racing, and so on. And at the time, there was one school in California that was called the ArtCenter College of Design, but they gave a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Design and a major in Transportation Design. And I was out there for 4 years, graduated. GM came out, interviewed the students, offered 3 of us a job at this spectacular design center north of Detroit, designed by Eero Saarinen. And I was excited to go there. A week later, I got my draft notice and ended up going to the wrong place for a couple of years. This was the late 60s. And then came back and GM again, and away we went. But as a designer, you had to have training in illustration because you have to portray your designs. And you better be decent at it because no one will take notice. So that, for someone who loved art to begin with, was good professional training.
So when you say portray your designs, you mean kind of create life out of them?
Well, true. The way you start out with automotive design, at least at that time, this was 68 when I came back, is the automobile, the exterior of the car is only an idea. And you're a newbie, you're a young creative designer, and you have to be able to render or portray your idea in a way that will attract the people that are going to be making those decisions. And that meant from doing illustrations on a smaller scale, sketches, nice tight renderings, to doing 15-foot long, full-size airbrush renderings of these automobiles. And that was just the process. And from there, it would go into a full-size clay model where sculptors created these shapes and so on. So it was very art-oriented. So when I moved toward what I wanted to do, which was free painting, I had, let's say, the technical skill to be able to just jump into it without taking years to try to develop that. So it worked out.
I noticed that a lot of your pieces are on the larger size. And now as you're telling me about the work that you did previously, that kind of makes sense. The larger sizes don't intimidate you.
It's very interesting because that is true. But when I moved to Kennebunkport originally, all I did was average size watercolors. And at the time I was showing, I had an opportunity to show in New York, and I was showing in the same gallery that Wyeth was painting out of, Coker. And these were Maine subject matter, so typical Maine subject matter. And I enjoyed that, and then that career developed, and I was asked to do watercolors for America's Cup Cruise, portraits and everything. They were all watercolors. And it wasn't until the early 90s that I had been contacted by some people in Washington. And they said, we really love your rowing watercolors. I had done a lot of rowing pictures on the Charles River. And they said, do you think you could paint classic automobiles? And I said, you're kidding. They said, no, do you think we like your style? I said, do you realize that I used to design automobiles? Do you realize that I fly to Pebble Beach to paint Bugattis and Duesenbergs? They had no idea. Then they said, can you or do you paint murals? And I said, yes, having never painted a mural in my life. And they said, this is perfect. There's a funny story as to how I was asked to price murals, but I won't go into it because I was completely unaware of that side of the art business. But anyway, that first mural I did was an indoor mural on canvas, and it was 120 feet long by 8 feet high for a company in Washington. And I got a lot of help and a lot of advice. And then other people would see it, and I ended up doing murals for Audi, and I do paintings for Ferrari and so on. And that's the automotive side. But since then, I've done many, many paintings that have nothing to do with automobiles, from portraits for the Smithsonian on commission to the history of Washington, D.C., to the history of the automobile at a museum in Detroit, to any number of things. And some of them are 6 or 7 feet wide, but not mural size. So I like to do both, and those are generally on canvas.
What's the difference between painting a smaller size and painting a larger size?
Well, it's humorous. I mean, if you can picture a 20 by 30 sheet of watercolor or canvas in front of you, you have the full scope of it. You can get focused and involved, and it's kind of thrilling and terrifying because we can all mess up a painting, but you're right there with it. When you're painting a mural, let's say it's a 40-foot mural, let's say it's 8 feet high, you're standing there in kind of a technical aspect. A foot from that mural, you can't see up, you can't see to the side or right or left. And it's more of something you just have to accomplish. And you have to do it well. You have to do it technically well. But it is the completion of a commission. And because most artists don't do murals for themselves, some do. But then you can back away. I have a studio in Woolwich where I can back away about 25 feet and see whether I've messed up or not. But it's a completely different structure that you have to psych yourself into.
So that must be a very large space.
It's pretty good size. The mural room is about 25 by 50. The whole studio is about 80 feet. And I've had it for about 25 years. The humor in it, of course, is if you don't have a mural, you don't need the space, but you can't get rid of the space. And so far I've been lucky. I usually do a mural every couple of years. But since I'm there, I do the larger paintings too because it's the same canvas. And then I'll do a watercolor at home in my home studio when I can. Yeah.
So when you're creating a mural that's a commission, I'm assuming you would have to plan it out, sketch it out ahead of time, but then have it approved by the people that you're doing this for?
You have to do research. Luckily, I've been doing this for a while. Luckily, people are aware of the work that I do, so they seek me out because they are interested in the way I paint, the style and the skill that I have, the way I paint. So now they will say, we've seen your work, pretty much go with it because we like what you do. Prior to that, we'd have to have long discussions so we would understand what each other would do. But I think now I have 14 or 15 murals in Washington and a couple, in the Michigan area and a couple in Europe and so on. So it's a known entity. But still, I'm an artist and I have to make a living. And commissions they don't put you in the space that you can be if you're doing a small watercolor for yourself or whatever. But what I like is having control of my day. I like the fact that I love a challenge. And so these commissions to me are, one, necessary, and two, really interesting. I'm not a good sailor, but I've been to Australia and Sardinia with 12-meter sailors. It was a thrill of a lifetime. I'm not a good rower, but I've met a lot of great rowers and enjoyed the sport. And so my range of subject matter is as much based on life experiences as it is on, pinholing as, a certain subject matter. So, so far, so good. I mean, I'd still like to get back to just the watercolors, but that isn't at this point.
Given the choice, what would you paint?
I still like painting main subject matter. I still like painting people, quiet scenes. I'm always have been a Wyeth fan, but contemporary-wise, a Neil Welliver fan. The great painters of the 19th century, I've always been very enamored with. I'm a realist painter that, not to dwell on it, but I believe that skill is something that is important when you're a realist painter, not necessarily an abstract painter. And the patrons that I have appreciate that, and they can see it. I know where my strengths are, I know where my weaknesses are, but skill is something that's important to me, so I try to create a piece that's personal and important to me and has artistic merits, but I try to do it realism in a skillful way. And so the subject can vary, but the application of my abilities is pretty much the same, whatever I paint.
Tell me about this piece that is in the studio behind us, and it's one that it's not one of your larger pieces because we have a smaller studio space, but it is a beautiful landscape, and you with the sailboats in the background. How would you describe it?
Well, this was I did purely out of enjoyment. I wanted to create 3 pieces for a show I had recently at the Portland Gallery. And I thought this size would be good. I originally was going to try to do more pieces, but I couldn't. So I thought I'd try to do something that had lovely light and mood and was more simplistic about Maine. So this is a piece that's somewhat designed to create a mood. I've seen many islands in Maine. I've lived in many different areas in Maine on a bay where I presently live. And I created this painting really involving a fog bank out of my head, but with lots of experience about what I've seen in Maine. And it's mildly abstract in a way, if you want to look at it, the simplicity of it. And I did a couple of other paintings that were similar size, that were more ethereal, kind of like this. And it was an experiment for me that I really enjoyed going into. So.
What originally brought you to Maine? What was the draw of the southern part of the state?
Well, it was that image of Maine, of Wyeth and Edward Hopper and Neil Welliver and so on. And as a designer, I lived in Bloomfield Hills at the time in Michigan. I was still going to galleries and looking at art and reading books and so on. And when we sold our home in Bloomfield Hills, for some reasons, we had to search out an area in Maine that would make sense in terms of going from one home to another. In our case, it had to be, the location of the house and the price of the piece, because that's part of life. And we'd heard wonderful stories about Kennebunkport. And so we went there, we looked around, we looked at Camden, and we thought that Kennebunkport was the most playful of those areas, so we moved there. And actually, we've been in Woolwich for 30 years because we moved out of Kennebunkport. My children love Kennebunkport. They still play tennis at the River Club. But we love Woolwich. It's a real town. BIW is there, and it's very interesting. The water is there. We're on a bay. It's more laid back, and half the people on the road are from Princeton, New Jersey. So there's a huge range of people that we enjoy there, including some of the great folks that were living there for years and years, just farming. So,
how would you describe the difference between the beaches down in the southern part of the state and up kind of on the mid-coast where you are now?
Well, the access is different. Reed State Park, for instance, is you're coming out of a forested area and not everyone knows about it, and it's on a back road in a peninsula. Kennebunkport, Gunkwit, York, all of these are, let's say, more touristed areas, but at the same time, people have enjoyed their summer homes there and year-round homes for years and years, but the beaches are more open access-wise. There's more of a social atmosphere in the southern part of Maine. I can't speak to Camden, but that's just a gorgeous harbor, but it's not really about a beach. But it's more playful, maybe more youth there engaged, more activities, more boat schools, and so on. But coming from Michigan, which also is a big sailing area, there still was this huge transition about the East Coast that we knew nothing about. So it was great fun to go there. The beaches, they do differ, but we have enjoyed both north and south areas.
And do you find that the water in the different places, Michigan, the southern part of Maine, mid-coast part of Maine, has influenced the art that you've done?
No, more the land than the water. I mean, in Michigan, you're talking about clear water, not salt water. I didn't do a lot of painting in Michigan. I was designing automobiles. I didn't really get into serious painting until I moved to Maine. And of course, then I was a 35-year-old newbie with an art education. But like most artists, I was influenced by lots of people that were more famed than anything, because that's what the access that I had. And yet my nature was realism, so that narrowed the focus. I appreciate contemporary art and abstract and everything else, German expressionism, but I'm a hopeless realist, so that's what I tend to go to. And as far as portraiture, looking at the great painters from the more profound, supposedly Thomas Eakins, to the incredibly talented John Singer Sargent, to the bizarre Lucian Freud paintings. You just have a whole range of things to be influenced by. And eventually I just evolved into my own style.
So I would imagine as a 35-year-old who's married with a family, making that leap from the safety of designing to full-time art, that must have been
that is the funny start. I've occasionally had these questions. My wife at the time was also an artist. She was involved with Ford Neural, which was a high-end corporate interior design group. They even worked on the World Trade Center years ago out of Michigan. And the truth is that I had enough confidence, which is hard to rationalize, but I had been treated well, had done well enough at a decent level that I didn't really think it through very much. It wasn't terrifying. We thought, well, let's go do this. And in retrospect, somehow I will look back and say, my God, how did we ever have the courage to do that? Except it wasn't courage. It was just almost a lark. And it's been kind of a gift. Now, she was a lovely person. We had 3 children. She was a well-known artist in this area, a pastel artist. She recently passed away. I've been married to my present wife, Bobby, for 30 years. And Bobby is also an artist, very creative, and restores oil paintings. So this whole thing has been a gift of an adventure. I see my children often. They come with us, and it's just been a really lovely life for the last 40 years, really. We're glad we did it.
My understanding is that Bobby also does a lot of your framing.
She used to. My framing style appears to be changing recently, so I'm not sure. Mostly what we do is she works in her garden and we go on sports car rides. So everything changes. And she's certainly capable of that. And she's certainly capable of a serious critique of my work. And I accept it, and she's saved me on many occasions. So there you go.
Now, I'm good friends with one of your children, your daughter, Kate.
Catherine,
yes. I call her Kate.
The redhead.
Yes, the redhead, and her wonderful husband and her two little boys. Yeah. And she's an artist and a designer, really in her own right.
So, well, Kate grew up with a couple of artist parents. Two boys grew up the same way. They were all going to be artists. They didn't end up doing that. Kate went to Savannah College of Art, got a degree in industrial design, and got into doing interior design with an architectural firm in New York City for a couple of years. And then came up here and got involved in working at the Portland Art Gallery, which she enjoyed, a magazine prior to that. And then she got into boat design, interior design, and has just kind of exploded. And she loves it. She's very personable, loves to travel. It's kind of interesting watching Joe, who does high-end cabinetry work, has his own firm, watching them juggle all this along with two young gentlemen. So I'm frankly amazed at their energy level, but I think I sort of remember it from the past at my end, but that was a while ago, you know.
And Kate also has been involved in kind of making sure that your art career in Maine moves forward.
Kate, for years, after I had an agent, John Payson, who I'd shown with in New York and Hobe Sound, Florida, and all over. And he was from a well-known art family, and we got along splendidly. And John went and died on me about 3 or 4 years ago, which is part of life. And Kate said, well, Dad, if you need an agent on the side, galleries are important, but I'd like to kind of get involved with that. And who am I to complain? So she's lifted the load off of me to a degree for my end of the work. Plus, I said yes immediately, because who wouldn't want to work with their daughter? So she's involved in that way, yeah.
And how has it been to work with your daughter? I know that I have a father who's in the field that I'm in, and I enjoy it. And also, we sometimes don't always see eye to eye.
Well, with humor, I will say Kate is a very capable, very straightforward, has no problem in stating her ideas about everything. But fortunately to Kate, when it becomes our relationship, I'm still Dad. And I love it, because she, on a professional level, takes care of what I need, strictly business, but we have this wonderful father-child relationship, although Kate is hardly a child, but you can imagine what I'm talking about. So it couldn't be better. So there you go.
As someone who's seen his art evolve over the years, from a more of a focused on the design that you were doing when you were employed to the work that you like to do now, do you see a direction? You've talked about watercolors. Is there something you'd like to explore next?
Yeah, I as much as I will never give up commissions, because I love the experiences and the interaction with people, but I guess my opinion is I should probably be retired by now, but if I was retired, I'd paint. So forgive me, but I might as well get paid for it. So I do that. But on my own, if I get even older, which I'm looking forward to, I would be in my studio at home, still doing paintings of Maine or whatever comes in mind, but with more of an ethereal feel that I just would move into emotionally. I still do it. In fact, everything you can't create a painting that you can let go unless you're serious about it, unless you try very hard, and unless you're satisfied with it. So anything I do my best. It's only years later that I might run into something that I did in the past that I might look at it and say, well, I guess I would like to have done that a little differently. But that's when it catches you completely off guard. So when I'm into a painting, regardless of the reason, I'm into it because I want to do a good job and I want to feel like an artist. I want that ethereal, joyful feeling that is the so-called artist stereotype, where you're doing something that you have a natural ability to do, but you feel fortunate to make a living doing it. So you're grateful at the same time you're in a position to be having that kind of a lifestyle. So it shows in the work, in the painting. As far as just my own personal style, I like to play up light, atmosphere, and drama. And I suppose known for that. But if it's tight realism, it's very obvious. If it's a subtle watercolor, it can be obvious, but it's more, it's more subtle. It's softer, but there's still light in the atmosphere, even if it's a face in a field, because I need that light rather than just a lack or a bland atmosphere, at least in my view. So,
does it take any kind of repositioning of your brain or your approach to go from a more realism-based piece to something more ethereal?
Yeah, but another example, I was asked, not to go back to it, but I just completed a painting of Martin Luther King, who had written the I Have a Dream speech at the Willard Hotel. And so that was to be a professionally painted portrait, pure realism, but it had to have a mood, because think of that speech. That was in the early 60s. It was a profound speech. He had toured the country with his obvious interest, but this was a special moment for him, and they wanted a certain feel that somehow portrayed a wistful, hopeful attitude. Now, given that speech, we can look back or forward and surmise where it went one way or the other. But I wanted to bring into my mind how to do that, and it wasn't just a technical feat by any means, because when you're doing a portrait, you need to portray someone that looks as they should, but you want some atmosphere and mood and spirit to it. So you have to do both, and that's what I try to do. And so I wouldn't say in my case, anything I'm painting, my head is generally in the same space. It's just that what am I trying to paint, and what does that require? Sometimes it's for me, and sometimes it's for someone else. But I still have to be satisfied, or I'd be terrified to show it to someone. If I don't like it and I think it's a failure, then someone else would too, so.
Not every artist likes to do commissions.
No.
And for you described it as a way to make a living.
And it's called Bring It On. I love it because the automotive field was highly competitive, very, very talented people, young guys at the time. Some women have been there now and they're very good, but a lot of ego. This design center was an absolute showplace. They treated us like little princes because they thought we were artists and we were sensitive and, we needed to be treated well, but in truth, most of us were drag racing on Woodward Avenue in Detroit, and we're just a bunch of guys and athletes. So we thought that was very funny. But what I'm talking about, it was a very aggressive environment. And so it was always a challenge, and how can I do this, or how can I do this best? So when I would get a call later to do these commissions, it was, yeah, I think I can do that. And where are we going? And who am I going to meet? And for instance, one time I'd never been to the Indy 500, and for Roger Penske, and they were about to win the Indy 500, and Philip Morris was backing them. And they flew me to the middle of the Indy 500, and I was in the pits watching these races. Now, that was cars, and I love cars, but it could have been anything. And you leave that, and you think, wow, was that ever an amazing experience? And then you have to do the painting, but they're separate, but not, because it's all involved. And when you're thrilled to be in a situation, imagine being on a 12-meter sailboat in the America's Cup when they're pre-racing other boats. Just imagine you're with the best sailors in the world, and you're there, and of course you have your camera because there's water. You're not standing there doing a sketch. But it's just unbelievable. And then to see the huge yachts that surround these America's Cup courses from all over the world so that they can watch these races, it's just an amazing experience, and you meet people. And so that, to me, is the motivation. The skill to be able to paint gets me there. So I'm dead serious about painting, but it's more than just that. You can't be afraid to pick up a telephone. You can't be so isolated if it's the way you want it, to just put yourself in a room and do still lifes. Many people do, and they're far better at it than I am, and they should do that. But that's just not where I came from.
Well, Jack, I'm really thrilled that you are willing to come and talk to me today about all the different aspects of your career over the years. And I know that people will
appreciate the opportunity. It's fun. It's been fun.
Well, I hope that people will take the time to look up your work on the Portland Art Gallery website and go to Portland Art Gallery and learn more about you. And maybe, I don't know, go to the Smithsonian and see some of your pieces down there.
Well, it's a great gallery in Portland, and I appreciate showing there. And we love Maine. That's all I can say. It's great.
I love Maine too.
Yeah.
I've been speaking with artist Jack Gable, who is represented by the Portland Art Gallery and also just longtime artist in his own right. I hope that you take the opportunity to learn more about his work, and I'm pretty sure you'll love his work as much as I do. You've been listening to Radio Maine, and I'm Dr. Lisa Belisle.